Hillary. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see your smiling faces yet again. Some familiar faces, some new faces. Always good to have you here participating in this momentous event we have every Saturday. Today we have a fun group. We've got kind of four of us up here playing the role of the leaders of the conversation. I'll give a quick intro to everyone and what's going on before we get started. But yeah, let me do that. Let me bring everybody up on the stream here who's relevant. So we'll bring on Morgan. We'll bring on Wayne. And then we've got Ed and me. All right, awesome. Now I'll give an intro to the session and we'll get rolling. So welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. We talk to anyone and everyone worth talking to, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs, all with the goal of becoming better at a craft, helping one another, and creating an ever more musical world. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And today's guest for the day is Ed Foote. Ed is a 1976 graduate of the North Bennett Street School. He began his career in Nashville, Tennessee in 1976. Since early on, he's worked on recording studios and spent 38 years as a piano technician for Vanderbilt Blair School of Music. He currently serves more private customers, fewer studios, and takes on more piano restoration. I'd like to give a couple more intros before we dive into the combo, but Ed, officially like to say welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Great to have you here. There he is. And as I said that intro, just before we got started, he was talking about how he's basically trying to subtly kind of get rid of his clients, but they just keep knocking down on his door. He wants to retire, but it's not quite happening. Just to finish that little story. I'd also, like to acknowledge Morgan Cowell. He's our he's our up and coming co-host for Piano Tech Radio Hour. He's invited Ed to the session today. He'll be driving the conversation quite a bit as well. And then secondly, we have Wayne Ferguson, who's joined us before on Piano Tech Radio Hour, as well as Piano Technicians Masterclasses. We decided to bring him on as a guest host today, so we could look to him for some guidance in our questions and conversation. A little bit about Wayne. He's a Canadian master piano tuner and technician. He's been widely considered to be among the very best in the business. He studied the art of piano tech and piano setup with passion and diligence. His former and present client list is a veritable who's who of the music industry in Canada and beyond. So without further ado, let's dive into this conversation. Ed, I think I want to start with something super basic before I hand off questions to the rest of the co-hosts in the audience. What made you think, piano tech sounds interesting? What was your entry point into this industry?
Well, to be honest, my entry point was a peyote button on a train going between Washington and New York. And I met a student from the North Bennett Street School walking down the aisle, and it changed my life. At the time, Bill Garlick and David Betts were the teachers, and I was finishing up a fine arts degree on the GI Bill and had no idea. I'd never thought about pianos in my life, but I've always been rather mechanical and I thought I was musical. And I remember this fellow saying that this school was taught by the best man on the planet, 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 planet. And it was like a bombshell in my life. I came home, I learned how hard it was to get into the North Bennett Street School. So I did have a personal friend at home, Kelly Ward, a two-time president of the Guild, and Elizabeth Probst's father. And he wrote a recommendation letter to Bill Garlick. And I was accepted at the school the next year without an interview. And I offer that as a testament to what a character like Kelly Ward has in terms of credibility. That he had a life of service to the Guild. He was one of the founding fathers of the PTG. And when he suggested that I would be a credit to the school, which I thought might be a stretch, Bill took him at his word and let me in. And I got to Boston, and I've never looked back. There's nothing I would rather do than work on a musical machine like a grand piano. I've built racing engines. We've made weird contraptions that would scare a welder's mother. But the piano itself is that combination of mechanism and music. And without knowing it, that's what I was born to do. If I ever got a tattoo, it has something to do with the piano.
We'll be looking out for that tattoo.
Don't hold your breath.
Morgan, can you tell us a little bit about?
You want me to just go from there?
Oh, I'm going to hand it over to Morgan real quick because I know. Well, I was just going to say something really quickly. Ed, if you're probably unaware of it, we've been doing the piano technicians master classes since 2017. We're doing the radio hour since basically the pandemic began to support piano technicians. But your name has come up over and over and over again. We got to get Ed Foote involved. We got to get him, teaching or becoming a guest and everything. So credit to Morgan for finally making it happen. And just wanted to turn it over to Morgan, just say, why did you think of Ed Foote to bring him on? And, what do you think we might direct our conversation to learn the most from him today?
Yeah, we've already kind of heard it a little bit, but he just has these these well-spoken and these kind of philosophical, viewpoints with the whole industry. And a lot of things that he has told me over the year just really have kind of stuck with me. One that I remember, one that he often uses with his clients is that if you don't like it, don't pay me. I think, Ed, that you got burned on that. What did you say? Twice in your whole career?
5 years. Yep.
Yeah.
I deserve one of them.
Expand on that, though.
It is a way of letting the customer feel secure. Obviously, I hope nobody here is named Jones, so I'll just use the generic Mrs. or Mr. Jones in their living room. When you start talking about them spending $20,000 on their grandmother's piano, they have a right to really wonder, is this it or not? Or if you're dealing with a professional pianist who is questioning it. When I tell them, and you don't tell this to everybody, this is not something that you automatically do or you'll get burned a lot. But if you're dealing with somebody who can really play the instrument and I want to sell them a regulation, I just tell them, I say, I'm not talking about a subtle improvement in your piano. I'm talking about a night and day difference in the way it plays. And if you don't agree with me when I'm finished, you don't have to pay me. So obviously, if I'm talking to a professional pianist with a totally out of regulation instrument, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. I know it will be a night and day difference. When you see springs throwing hammers off of jacks and jacks way up under knuckles and hammers laying on the rest of you know that you can make a night and day difference. So I've had a lot of people visibly relax as soon as I say that they can go into this without a risk, which is what it's designed to do. And it's a very effective sales tool.
Yeah. So let's go to right after you graduated from North Bennett and you went down to Nashville. And you weren't from there originally, were you?
No, I was from Louisiana.
And I think you watched a movie, right? And then made you want to go to Nashville?
Well, I saw Robert Altman's movie Nashville and realized that that was my kind of town. But in college, I not only ran the photographic services for the university, but I played in a bluegrass band. And I was pretty hot stuff in Ruston, Louisiana. So I thought I would come to Nashville and use piano work to support me while I got established as a bluegrass guitar player. And I got to Nashville and within 3 weeks found out I did not know how to play a guitar. This town is not normal. The postman sat down one afternoon and sounded like Doc Watson, and he told me he wasn't near good enough to get work in this town. So I had my piano technology behind me, and I got a lucky break, and things just took off. And if you want, I'll shortly describe the lucky break. Was down at the Old Time Picking Parlor, I met Harold Bradley, the most recorded guitarist in Nashville history and the president of the Musicians Union. And Randy Wood told me to give him my card. And the next day, he was in a session that had a problem with the piano. There was an older blind fella in town doing all the recording work. And he was starting to drink and become a little bit undependable. That was the normal recording time so the musicians could go from studio to studio. And I tuned the piano before the 2 o'clock, and I tuned it as Bill Garlick had taught us to tune. And it was a 9-foot Chickering. It was the piano that Ray Stevens did Everything Is Beautiful on that night at this session. But musicians for several years after that remembered that session because everybody came back at 2. And as they told me later, they realized that everybody was in tune with each other and the piano all at once. And that had never happened. They weren't fudging anything. And the day after that, 2 of those musicians were at other studios and suggested they call this new guy. And 2 days after that, it went viral. Within 2 weeks, I had 20 recording studios.
Wow.
So I would offer this as a testament to the quality of education North Bennett actually has, because I wasn't magic, I was a greenhorn, but I had the tuning that North Bennett sends us out with. And Nashville, Tennessee session musicians had never heard anything like it. They had been used to a fairly loose result, but they had never known the difference, oddly enough.
I think they call it good enough for rock and roll.
Well, it was just kind of the standard. Everybody was just used to fudging, bass players fudging and everything around whatever the piano was, because this was well before ETDs. The only thing going was a Conn Stroba tuner, which will do the job, but it's very difficult to use. So that was enough for my wife and I to live on very quickly. And I've been in the studios ever since. What I'm most proud of is that I was able to charge $20 a tuning instead of Ted's $18. And I've just taken it as a point of testing myself to keep my price in front of anybody around here my whole career. So I was making 20 while they were making 18. Big stuff.
Yeah, and that says you're not still making 20. I think that's not why they continue to call you these days.
No, my tuning start at 200 now. I don't tie myself down. A lot of home tunings, there's pitch raise involved. But tuning is hard on the body. I cover this in my convention classes. I think Morgan's going to let me come up to Reno. Tuning, if not, I wasn't very smart. My classes actually don't be like me. So any young tuners out here in the Zoom world, I would suggest you think long and hard about the ergonomics of approaching the work, because this career will damage your body. There is so much repetitive stress that if you don't consciously counteract it, it accumulates. I've had 5 shoulder surgeries, 3 carpal tunnel releases, an elbow and a thumb rebuilt. I've tuned 37,000 pianos in the last 45 years. And at 1,000 blows per piano, that's about 37 million times my hand has hit the keys. And talking with my orthopod, he said, well, you know, that cartilage is not designed for that. So you younger tuners, pay really close attention to what you're doing to yourself. This is not a free trade. It will exact a price if you're not mindful of how we do this. But I was also told to be wary about name dropping, so I would just like to get that all over with at once. So Chet, Garth, Crystal, Porter, Reba, Dolly, and Ronnie. Okay, now I feel better.
There you go.
There are a lot of big names that are in and out of the studios, and some of them, you know, Chet Atkins was very, very astute. Porter Wagner was off the charts nuts when it comes to expecting the piano to carry the load. And the normal Nashville thing is a piano, bass, and drums put down a rhythm track, and then they start dumping everything on top of it. So what the piano catches a lot of blame for any problems later. And cocaine busted sessions, and a lot of people were unhappy. And the piano always got the blame. But I stuck by my guns, and I would tell them. Somebody reminded me once that I looked right at Boots Randolph and told him, no, you're playing sharp. It was the low point of the session, but I was brash and young, and that was just one of those events.
What does that mean?
So,
you're playing sharp.
Well, he thought that I had tuned the piano, the treble flat.
Yeah. Got it.
I thought he was biting his reed a little too hard.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, this is, you know, once we learn, once we have our tuning and have faith in our work, there are times, be tactful. I wasn't, but most people can be. Stick by your guns. We know what we're doing. So one thing I would mention, that when I got to Nashville, all of these studio pianos had been taken care of by Ted, the blind fellow, who had never pulled an action. And of course, you know, all of us that come out of North Bend, the first thing we want to do is pull an action. We walk up to a piano, let's see what's in here. So I started pulling actions out, and they were full of pills, guitar picks, cigarette butts, and roaches. Not the animal roaches, joint roaches. So, of course, I threw all the pills away, and I threw all the cigarette butts away. But I have this big jar of classic old guitar picks. Some of these have been in there since the 50s. And I started looking at actions and started talking to people about action work besides just tuning. And found out very quickly that it's very hard to do action work on a recording studio piano that people know very well without changing the sound. And if they're cutting hits with these pianos, they don't want the sound changed. So anybody that does go into a recording studio, a successful studio that likes their piano sound, be very circumspect about making any change. One example is that 9-foot Chickering I mentioned that I got my start on. It had the original scale, and for the life of me, I could not actually tune it as well as I thought I could tune. It always had some weird problems in it, trying to temper it evenly and move out. When the pen block finally failed, they had me rebuild that piano, and I took measurements and sent them to Dr. Sanderson, and he sent me back the bass strings and a scale for that 9-foot Chickering that he had devised. And I put it in, and once it was stabilized, I realized I could tune it It tuned evenly, fourths, fifths, thirds, sixths, tenths, you name it, top to bottom. And they didn't really like the change. They thought it had lost something. Some of this raggedness was part of its character. So I, of course, lacquered the hammers and everybody was happy again. Studios here like things extremely bright. And a really good studio musician is somebody that can play with no dynamics. The engineers want to see that needle hit the same number in that track. If they've got an instrument that changes voice with volume, like we all try to make the perfect hammer do, it's very difficult to record. If you have a classical studio, things are very different. But in the Nashville tracking world, the pianos are basically playing the rhythm guitar part. And they want an extremely bright piano because the bass drum and the bass guitar need those frequencies down there. And a full body piano sound will make things sound really muddy.
This is really interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to reflect too on, pianos in different countries and different musical styles and contexts, on the concert stage, in the home, upright pianos, grand pianos. There is that aspect of the nuance of it all, that it's not just about how do you tune a piano in general, it's how do you treat that piano with the sensitivity to its context and also the player of the piano, right? It's fascinating.
Tim Blees was here. He's a well-known tech. And I took him in the studio and showed him this chick ring, and he played 2 or 3 notes on it. And all he could say was, they use this piano? Because it sounds like glass, but it records exactly as they like it. One sidelight to this is Edgar Meyer, a very, very fine bass player, and Yo-Yo Ma wanted to do a duet recording, and with their cachet, they were able to take one of our concert pianos from Vanderbilt into a recording studio, and they liked it, and they